Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the far, far away but closer than ever virtual tour. We are excited to venture out into Ohio at Max Books in Cleveland Heights and really, branch out and get everybody involved as possible on all coasts, up or down, left or right, and in the sky. We hope that you are happy, healthy, and warm. Michael is away today, and Ghost Chad will hopefully be coming in a little bit later, but if not, that's okay. And I'll be flying the ship solo. We have a great guest speaker and readers as always. We're excited to include as many people as we can. If you would like to be part of these readings with us and to present and share your work and to be part of our community and expand and really become whole and together, email ghost@nervousghostpress.com. I want everyone to share, regardless of what kind of art you do, cooking, dance, photography, art, music, anything. It's all welcome and appreciated. Remember to follow us on our social medias, Instagram, Twitter, and the website and Facebook, of course, www.nervousghostpress.com. Check out the Chills at Will's podcast with an interview of Michael and I, as well as the Chronicles Datebook article from last month. They are great ways to learn a little bit about us, who we are, why we are, and what we're doing. Oopsies. So I wanted to share a little bit about today's event and everything else that we're doing. Hold on, I'm getting distracted. It's all good. The September events, it was going to be a road trip and it was going to be fantastic. I was going to road trip myself to Ohio. That's where Ghost Chad lives. And it was going to be something that was really fun and exciting. I've never been to Ohio. I remember one time I asked him about the snow. I wanted to see the snow fall. And unfortunately, the closest thing we have is, our weather these days. And I hope everybody stays safe where you are and to take care of your families and yourself and everything else. But I was talking with Chad and I said, hey, I want to see the snow. And he was telling me, he's like, it's really fun on day one. And then afterwards you hate it. And I asked all my friends who live in areas where there's heavy snow, and they've all said the same thing. And, somehow I think they're lying to me. So I have to experience it for myself. But, we're happy to be here. We're happy to have, the opportunity to work with bookstores and people and community members. And so if you're in the area, go to Max Books, buy books, support our businesses and support each other. Don't forget to write all your notes in our notebook, our Nervous Ghost Press notebook. The pages are, I think it's 60 pound. So 60 pound pages for a notebook are, pretty decent. They can carry your secrets. I wouldn't write your secrets in here because there's no lock. And you don't want people to find out what you write in a journal called the Nervous Press Journal. Of course, Writing for Life, our anthology. It is beautifully made, and the words are even more beautiful. Come together, join us, and we are excited to get this evening started. This is normally where I would pass off to Michael or Chad, and I'm going to be Michael and Chad today, which is kind of cool. Hold on, what's going on here? Oh, it's over there. And I do have a few other words before we really get started. These events have been, I think I said it last time, the highlight of my summer, and they really have. They've been something that I can look forward to every month or every week whenever we have them, especially when things are getting, a little bit stressful and I'm losing my mind out here. It's given me a way to express myself and to be part of something bigger than me. I think that's really nice. I'm excited to announce, we're going to have some hopefully events in October. and Michael and I had been talking about maybe a costume contest, a face painting contest, something where we can have fun. You know, I think Halloween is canceled, and I'm not too thrilled about that. You know, we need Halloween. We need to dress up as you know, characters and go out and express ourselves and get candy. You know, dentists need our business. We need cavities. They need us to go there and pay them to rip open our teeth and make our you know, our smiles pretty again. So eat your chocolate. You know, eat your the Jolly Ranchers and everything else. And so we will get started because I don't want to keep rambling off over here. And our first speaker is all the way in North Carolina, which I've never been there either. So I got to go there and see what that weather's like, right?
Yes, you do.
And, and so Heather, share a little bit about yourself, and then hop into your writing. And just to, you know, introduce you a little bit, your writing is fantastic. You know, everybody's is, and I can say it because I've read them all and I think they're all fantastic. But, you know, when I did read these, I was writing notes all the time. And I remember reading it, and, you know, there are parts, and I'm not going to ruin it for anybody, but where I'm reading and I'm just like, damn, you know, and it made me say the damn. And if something can make me say the damn, I think it's pretty swell. And so Helen, please have at it.
Okay. Well, quick shout out to my folks in the Cleveland area. Even though I'm in North Carolina, I work for a foundry based in Elyria, Ohio, not far from Cleveland. So shout out to my friends up there. So just a little bit of background here. I've written all my life, mostly short stories, flash fiction, got into poetry and feature screenplays. Basically, I write to maintain my sanity, as most of us do. But I'll let the words speak for themselves, though, if I can just go ahead and launch right in. And I warn you that I do have a box of Kleenex handy because I still cannot get through my own writing without tearing up. That's because it is very close to home. This piece is called Minor in Possession, and it was basically a letter I wrote to my son when he turned 18. So without further ado, I'll jump right in. As I sat on the edge of your bed that Sunday morning, watching you sleep, I remembered you as a small boy, innocent, sweet, and trusting. I didn't want to wake you. You looked so peaceful, your eyes moving rhythmically under their lids, your breath quiet and even. But you had to go to work, and you weren't going to get up on your own, so I woke you as gently as I could. You protested weakly, but then you rose, you showered, you dressed, you drank your coffee, you ate your cereal. You'd only had 3 hours sleep, but I'd had less. As I drove you to work, you began to cry. You looked so vulnerable as we entered the parking lot, but you blew your nose, put on a brave face, and said you'd be okay. I told you to let your manager know you'd been in an accident and nothing more. You said okay, and walked away. As I watched your back disappear into the store, I began to cry. I felt your hurt, your embarrassment, your sense of loss. When the phone rang at 4:35 a.m., I was sound asleep. When I heard the voice say, "To accept this call, press 1," I hung up. It just didn't register. The next time it rang, I listened. I shouted at your dad to turn on the light. He rolled over, he grunted, but he didn't rise. I laid the receiver down and ran to the light switch on the wall. I got back in time to hear it. "To accept this call, say yes." I said yes. "Mom," you said. Yes, I said. "Are you okay?" "Not exactly," you said. "Where are you?" I asked. "At the police station in Rock Hill," you said. "Are you hurt?" I asked. "No, but I've been arrested." At that point, I screamed at your dad, who was half awake and half listening anyway. I told him to hurry up and get to the extension in the kitchen. As he did so, you told me what happened. You told me how you'd been trying to find a senior class party in Lake Wiley, just over the border in South Carolina. How you'd gotten lost, how you'd driven around for hours not knowing where you were, how you went off the road into a ditch, how the police found you, how they asked if you'd been drinking, how they found 2 unopened bottles of beer in your car, how they had cuffed you and made you slide into the back seat of the patrol car, how they took you to the station, how they gave you a breathalyzer test, how they booked you for minor in possession, how they made you sign papers, how they took away your North Carolina driver's license, how they processed you and made you wait. Your dad made you repeat everything from the very beginning. He began yelling you, asking you why you'd been going to a party when you told us you'd be spending the night with your friend, asking why you'd been drinking, asking you how you ended up in a ditch alongside the road in Rock Hill, South Carolina. All the seniors were going, and they had a cake of Newcastle, you offered. You immediately regretted saying that, didn't you? Or at least you should have, but your dad beat you to the punch. All the seniors didn't end up in a ditch, did they? All the seniors didn't end up arrested, did they? Your dad's voice was predictably sarcastic, the tone of voice he always assumes when angry, which, as you know, isn't often. It was probably heightened by the hour, his lack of sleep, and the worry he was feeling. You began to cry. A police officer came on the line. He briefed us. He told us that you were not legally drunk. The reading came in at .02. You'd probably had one beer, he said. He told us that in South Carolina, they're a zero tolerance state. He also explained that any reading of alcohol in your system was grounds for immediate suspension of your license for 3 months. The fact that you had 2 unopened containers of beer in your car constituted probable cause, giving them the right to arrest you and charge you with minor in possession. A misdemeanor offense, he was quick to point out, but a serious offense and one with potential future implications. He told us that we could come to get you and that we'd have to pay $199 in cash as bond. He gave us the number to call for the contracted impound lot where your car had been towed. He could provide no details, he explained, as to how much they'd charge us to retrieve it. They'd have to tell us that. And then he wrapped up by saying you were a good kid, a polite kid, and that you were very upset, very afraid, and that you'd learned a lesson. What he didn't tell us is that he then escorted you to a drunk tank with 5 adult men, took your belt and shoelaces from you, handed you a blanket, and locked the barred door behind you. And there you remained until we came, after throwing on our clothes, feeding 2 very confused kitties, finding an ATM to withdraw the required cash, and crawling along unfamiliar roads to Rock Hill, saying aloud to one another, "We better not get lost." The details became clearer as the weeks passed. You began filling in the blanks for us, giving us little snippets of you as you felt we were ready to hear them. After the Sadie Hawkins Day dance at school that fateful Saturday night, you'd been invited to the senior party at someone's lake house. There'd be a keg there, you were told, and most of the senior class would be in attendance. You wanted to go. Someone gave you 3 bottles of beer in the school parking lot. This same someone was handing them out to everyone he encountered. You drank one. You were thirsty. You then put the remaining 2 bottles on the floor behind the driver's seat of your car and threw the empty in the dumpster in the school parking lot. I don't suppose it ever crossed your mind that drinking on school property was grounds for immediate expulsion with no right of appeal. Of course, from what you told us, more than half the senior class would have been expelled that night, if they'd been caught. You headed out of the parking lot with some vague notion of how to get to the party, but it was late, you were tired, and you got lost. You couldn't remember how long you'd been driving around. You stopped at a couple gas stations for directions. You couldn't remember exactly how you ended up in a ditch on the side of the road, on the northbound entrance ramp to Interstate 77, in Rock Hill, heading the opposite direction of traffic, stuck in deep red mud with your front tire blown out. You think you must have fallen asleep at the wheel, and we had to agree. It seemed the most logical explanation. It was 3 o'clock in the morning when the police officer wrote out the ticket. It was 7 o'clock in the morning when we got you home and into bed for a few hours sleep before you had to go to work. You could have been killed, or you could have hurt someone else. Those are the thoughts that passed through our minds as the facts were revealed to us one by one, and as we digested them through our parental filters. And if you'd had a little more to drink, you might have been charged with DUI, resulting in the loss of your license for 3 years, as well you should have. As it stood, with the assistance of a well-connected, good old boy attorney, you had your license returned to you. It seems the police had no right to take it away from you since it was out of state and they'd overstepped their jurisdictional bounds. In lieu of a court date, you were given pretrial intervention consisting of 40 hours community service, with your record expunged upon its completion. It was in your favor that the arresting officer thought you were a good kid. It was also in your favor that the Rock Hill City solicitor had been the college roommate of our attorney's law partner. A little political incest never hurts, particularly in South Carolina. We didn't want you to think you'd gotten away with anything. You had to earn back your driving privileges. You had to pay us back for the attorney's fees, the impound fees, the towing fees, the cost to replace the tire and rim, and the wheel balancing. You were restricted from going out with your friends on weekends for a good long while until you'd earned back some semblance of our trust. Yes, you had to beg rides from friends to and from school, and if no one else was available, horror of horrors, you had to ride with one of us. We drove you to and from work on weekends. Frankly, it was a pain in the ass for us to do so, aside from it being a major source of embarrassment for you. As I sat on the edge of your bed that Sunday morning, watching you sleep, I remembered you as a small boy, innocent, sweet, and trusting. I remembered the last time you'd been in the back seat of a police car. You were only 2.5 years old. We were fleeing from your biological father, the man who had nearly killed me. We were being driven to a women's shelter. You had your teddy and your blanket, and you had me. You didn't understand what was happening. All you wanted was the lights and siren. The policeman told you to be patient. It had to be just the right spot to turn them on. He waited until we were down the block from the shelter on a quiet, oak-lined street. And then he let loose. There was a whooping sound and the lights danced. It only lasted a moment, but you were so thrilled. You chattered about it for days. From the shelter, we left for Virginia, back to where I had grown up and where my mother still lived. I found a job, an apartment, and a preschool for you. You adjusted well to the changes. You were so young, so resilient, so brave. 4 months later, I received a phone call at work from your preschool's director, delivering the words I'll never forget. You'd been kidnapped. Your father had driven from California in a pickup truck with Colorado plates and waited down the street from your school, watching. We only learned much later he'd been watching our comings and goings for a week. There was a fire engine parked in the circular drive of the school that day, visiting from the local station house. The firefighters had been giving you and your classmates a demonstration of their equipment. It proved a convenient distraction. Your father grabbed you. When they heard your screams, you were already being hustled to the cab of the pickup truck. The firefighters gave chase in their fire engine all over Vienna and Tyson's Corner. They lost you on the Washington Beltway. I spoke to the police, the FBI, the State Department, the Yugoslav embassy. Your father had obtained an American passport for you and a Yugoslav visa. There was every indication he'd taken you to Belgrade, where his parents still lived. The sense of loss was overwhelming. I explored every legal avenue to try to find you, but there was no trace. I borrowed money from relatives. I hired a private investigator. Still nothing. I spent my days working and making phone calls when I could. I spent my nights volunteering on a political campaign, stuffing envelopes, making calls, because I just couldn't make myself go home to my empty, silent apartment. It was at the campaign office that I met the man you've always considered your dad. He was another volunteer. He wouldn't go away. I spilled my guts to him, the entire unbelievable story, leaving out no detail, hoping it would frighten him away. It didn't. He told me I needed a friend, someone to talk to, and he told me that he was that someone. I came to agree, reluctantly. He helped me navigate those horrible months by just being there, pushing me to eat when it was the last thing I wanted to do, and insisting there was always hope that you'd return. No, it wasn't a sexual attraction at first, but an offer of friendship, a shoulder, an ear. 4 months later, when I'd arrived at the decision to travel to Belgrade, hire an attorney there, navigate a foreign legal system, and myriad cultural and language barriers, my mother received a phone call. It was your father. He was back in California, back in our old house, and he still had you. He told your grandma that I could come out there and retrieve you if I signed a paper he'd drawn up, agreeing to share custody. I told him I would, after receiving assurances from an attorney that signing any such paper would constitute duress. So instead of heading to Yugoslavia, I flew out to California and we met in the airport. I'd had no contingency plan if you hadn't been with him, as he'd promised. I signed his handwritten paper, and you and I boarded a red-eye flight back home without ever setting foot outside the terminal once you were with me. You slept the entire flight, while I stayed awake, unable to take my eyes off you. In 2 years and over $20,000, paid off in small increments over many years, but I was awarded sole custody with no visitation rights for your father, save for over the telephone. His attorney conceded the custody fight was your father's way of just getting back at me for leaving him, and a means to protect his immigration status. He didn't want to take care of you or assume any responsibility for you whatsoever. He stopped the phone calls after only a month, and there's been no further contact with him. The court records have remained sealed ever since, a symbolic ending, at least, to a troubling chapter of our lives. You don't remember those 4 months, save little snatches. You were being hidden in Texas in a safe house provided by a Father's Rights Network, the same Father's Rights Network that provided an attorney to your father pro bono for the court proceedings. We don't know much that time either. Yes, that persistent guy I'd met, remained my someone and was there for us both from the moment you returned. What we do know is that you came back with bruises and scrapes over most of your body, night terrors, and a fear of the dark. We tried everything we could to help you overcome the disturbing memories, including therapy. But mostly, we gave you assurances that you were loved and you were safe, and carried through with practical safety measures, including changing your school. Do you remember when we took you to the police station shortly after you returned home? And they let you sit in the patrol car and turn on the lights and siren. And then we took you to the fire station and you were able to meet the men who'd followed your father's truck. And they let you turn on the lights and the siren. You wanted to be a policeman or a fireman, you told them. You brought tears to their eyes and ours. What helped the most, though, was that you fell in love with your new dad. It was mutual. When we married a year later, you were thrilled. You were convinced we were doing it for you, and in a sense, we were. This man has always loved you as his own, and you have always considered him a friend as well as a parent. You've been good for each other, and your dad and I have been good for each other as well, entering our marriage as friends first and then lovers. You're a man now, thousands of miles from us, leading a life you love. But I still remember when, at 13, you finally stored your teddy and blanket in a closet. I didn't say anything to you then, but I recognized it as a turning point of sorts, and it made me cry, still does. Yes, you've grown up. You've made many friends, close friends, who've been there with you throughout the years. It's your loyalty, generosity, and compassion that attracted them to you in the first place. Animals trust you immediately, with good reason. You'd never hurt any living creature, for you were genuinely kind. Of course, there have been moments of maturity, naivete, and stubbornness, and numerous opportunities for more lessons learned. They're endearing when one considers the whole package, and doing so is written in that mythical, all-encompassing parent's how-to handbook after all. And while at one time you considered making your way as a jazz drummer, and possessed the talent to do so, the outdoors beckoned instead and won you over, culminating in your choice of Prescott College for your studies. You've been a wildland firefighter, a forest ranger, an outdoor educator, a wilderness first responder, an EMT, a carpenter, a rigger, working in multiple national forests and parks and at poles, both poles, south and north. You've explored the far reaches of the world by foot, mountain bike, raft, or telemark skis, starting with a through hike of the Appalachian Trail and followed by explorations throughout the Western United States and in Canada, New Zealand, Nepal, Mongolia, Greenland, the Republic of Georgia, Iceland, and Ecuador, with more exotic destinations on your wish list. You approach each adventure with an open mind and your glorious smile, and hard-earned cash saved from your tough seasonal work in harsh environments. Skipping a little bit and just wrapping it up here. We couldn't be prouder of the man you've become in spite of and because of the struggles and stumbles along the way. But wherever you go, you'll always be our son, our sweet, innocent, sweet, and trusting son, no matter the miles that separate us or how many years have passed. Well, I got through that without crying, so that's good. So I can move on to a prose poem unless, okay, I'll just go into that. This one was basically a prose poem published in Prometheus Dreaming back in January of this year, and it ties in a little bit with this story as well. Wisdom born of pain. You were 20, he was 22. You fell for his charming, can't quite place it, but probably Slavic accent, and his constantly mangled idioms. And yes, you fell for his physicality. The slim hips, broad shoulders, flat stomach, mess of dirty blonde hair, brown eyes framed with impossibly long lashes, olive-toned skin, and that tiniest of detours to an otherwise perfectly angled nose, a remnant of his boxing days. You told yourself it was the passionate political discussions that were a turn on, their heated nature a challenge to you like a game of his beloved backgammon. But you were deluding yourself, blinded to the clues of what lay beneath the attractive surface, denying the meanness and absurd jealousies he revealed in tiny increments, like some perverse preview of the next chapter. If only you'd opened your eyes. But you were young and too easily swayed into the complacency of temptation, the gravitational pull of dependency. He had you where he wanted you. You loved him and naively thought it reciprocal. But he was only after the green card and the pragmatic opportunity, the easy, uncluttered path to a win you presented. You were his blot. You were 25, he was 27. You had married the Serb, bore his son, witnessed the endless parade of family members arriving from the old country. You listened silently as he berated you for the smallest of infractions, his voice taking on a sinister tone, even in whispers, that made his physicality, once such a turn-on, seem daunting, threatening, ominous. You wondered just how much the nature element of nature-nurture would impact your still innocent child. And when the impact of his tightly closed fist upon your jaw left an indentation in the sheetrock behind your head, it wasn't entirely unexpected. You stared at it, even as the pain washed over you, even as consciousness fell away, like a focal point you'd clung to during labor, seeking sanctuary from the brutal reality of the moment. From that point on, you refused to delude yourself any longer. You fled, taking your son with you, saving him, saving yourself, invoking the assistance of strangers, embarrassed as that made you feel. You had failed miserably at first love. Hell, you'd failed to even recognize it for what it was. You were 45, your son was 22. Your jaw had been surgically reconstructed to correct its improper healing from 20 years before. You were safe. You were remarried. Your life was calm. You were convinced nurture had won out when it came to your son, and that gave you peace. Your scars reminded you, though, gaining wisdom may hurt, but it trumps delusion. You had traveled far from your younger self. You no longer believed the violence raining down on your body and soul was deserved, punishment for some unknown imperfection, even though it was a fate, a sentence you'd once considered inevitable. Distance had made it all so clear. The cloak had been removed, the monster revealed. Your own metamorphosis could begin. It continues still as you struggle to tamp down the insecurities that once betrayed you and held you in their web. You need only close your eyes and feel the tightening in your jaw to remember the descriptor he flung at you more than any other, the moniker you were expected to wear as some cruel, efficient summary of all you ever were to him. No, you tell yourself, I am not a stupid bitch. Yes, you were a child who believed in the existence of charming princes until you learned you could remove all the pieces from the board, out-strategizing even the most calculated of foes. You didn't need a prince for that. Okay, I'm wiped. Sorry.
Incredible. Thank you. You know, when you were reading it, I, especially before, or you told us, you know, you're writing to maintain sanity. Absolutely. And, you know, I write to do that. I write to do, you know, a lot of things, but certainly to keep my brain, you know, I need it. And, you know, while you're reading and the aspects of emotion is something that really, I think, adheres to myself, and that the power of writing, that it can bring back emotions from so many years ago, as if it just happened. And it's, you know, it's like time travel in a good or a bad way, depending on how you look at it. But, you know, same thing with I think all forms of art, whether it's pictures and paintings and taste and smells and all these things, it takes us back to that specific moment. And I think that is part of the power of our arts, of how we create and, you know, express ourselves, that we can do that. And that not only that, but your emotions can then, through your words, inject themselves into my brain and I can feel them. And I think that is powerful as well. And, you know, as you said in your prose poem, Wisdom Born from Pain, you know, a while ago, someone had told me once that, you know, pain is what allows us to feel compassion. And that's where we learn to feel compassion and be compassionate. And I think that, you know, compassion is one of the greatest emotions that we could have. And unfortunately, we have to feel the pain first, which sucks. But what it does do, and what I believe, is that the positive, and, you know, we go through an experience, we can write about it and then say, hey, come with me. Mm-hmm. I'll be your Sherpa for, you know, your experiences. And I think it's something that is amazing. You know, it's truly an awesome, in the awesome kind of way of awe-inspiring or whatever, you know. And so I'm very happy that you shared, and I'm happy that you continue to share, and that you are open to emotions, because, you know, emotions are so important. And, you know, I always tell my friends and my students, you know, your emotions stay out the door when we're in class, but no, they are very important. And I'm happy that we can share these and bring ourselves together. And so thank you.
I really appreciate it.
And so now our next speaker, and, you know, I don't have Michael here to do the proper introductions, and so it's going to be a little bit streamlined today. But our next speaker is someone that has been here before, has read with us, and enjoyed her writing and her reading. I think everybody does. And so Leslie, share a little bit about yourself if you like, and then hop on into your reading. I'm happy to hear it. I'm excited. And so everybody, Leslie Hill.
Thank you, Matthew. And thank you, Helen, for your reading. I'm from Vancouver, Canada at the moment. And before that, it was Toronto, Ontario, where we did have quite a bit of snow. And actually, I really love the snow. We don't get enough in Vancouver, although it's there in the mountains. I also write for sanity, but mostly I write to know what it is that I'm thinking and feeling. So just the act of writing helps me go deeper in whatever it is that I'm exploring. I've tried my hand at fiction, but to tell you the truth, I never believe in my own fiction. So I tend to write nonfiction and essays. And the one in Writing for Life is called The Cost of Silence. And I'll read just the first part of it. When I was in my early 40s, an acquaintance hauled me along to a local psychic fair one warm July day. I wasn't interested in psychics, but I couldn't manufacture an excuse quickly enough, so I went. I wandered aimlessly among psychics with tarot cards, crystal balls, horoscope charts, and crystals before pausing in front of a man without props. I don't recall his age or appearance. He looked at me for a moment or two and then said, "When I look at you, I see a woman without a mouth." Silence. How does that happen? I'd taught high school for 20 years. I came of age in the tumultuous 60s as feminism was gathering steam. The birth control pill became available, and before long, so did access to legalized abortion, at least in Britain and the US. I was aware that I came from an emotionally repressed family, that I wasn't saying much about the turmoil of recent widowhood or my struggle to get past grief, rage, and bewilderment and find a reason to live. But a woman without a mouth? I tried to forget that moment with the psychic and failed. The image haunted me. Over time, I recognized that I was riddled with fears of loss, of my own feelings, of failure, violence, of the spotlight. That the quality I most admire in others is courage. That speaking my truth, standing up to conflict, being visible, felt unsafe. I preferred the shadows. 5 decades after the 60s, the status of women, though improved, is far from equal. Women still experience an appalling amount of violence in intimate relationships. Abortion rights are under attack, and the morning after abortion pill is hard to obtain. Margaret Atwood's 1985 dystopian novel, The Handmaid's Tale, depicting a society in which women are enslaved to bear children, looks more prescient now than it did 35 years ago. I'm 70. What I appreciate about aging is the invisibility. Because most people don't notice or care about older women, I feel as if I have little to lose. But I cringe when I compare myself to women with the courage to stand up to domestic violence, report rape, or accuse powerful men of sexual assault. I'm in awe of their bravery, choked up and tearful. In these days of populist politics, social media, fake news, abortion restrictions, the Me Too movement, and the Black Lives Matter movement, it feels to me harder than ever to speak out. But even I can see that it's essential. Standing up to bullies, whether in the workplace, in our institutions, in the street, or at home, is the only hope to take back power. Most adult women have experienced bullying in the form of a controlling partner, sexual harassment, or date rape at some time or another. These experiences are ubiquitous, but so often hidden that statistics aren't dependable. The US Equal Employment Opportunity Commission reports that 70%, 70, of victims of workplace harassment never make a formal complaint. The same is believed true of domestic violence and rape. In my 20s, I was engaged for almost a year to a man who sought to control me by manipulation, emotional blackmail, and eventually physical force. I fled and didn't date again for 4 years. In middle age, I was coerced into sex by someone I thought was a friend. My roommate in university was raped by a date. We said nothing. Mostly we assumed we'd been careless or stupid or unlucky. My main concern was my own safety. After that, hiding my shame. As long as no one knew how stupid or naive I'd been, I could swallow the humiliation I felt and hold my head up. As long as I never had to see the man again, I'd survive. I didn't think about the other women he might victimize. I didn't think about justice. I assumed I wouldn't get any. In a he said, she said situation, what could be proven? I also never stopped to wonder what was happening to me as I retreated from any situation that might lead to danger. When my husband died young, I backed away from intimate relationships. Whether they ended in loss or violence, they felt too dangerous. In seeking safety, I stopped living fully. It's taken me a long time to see that. It's not what I want for young women. When did something begin to shift in my life? I was 31 when I met the man I would eventually marry. Early in our relationship, I realized that he didn't want a mirror for his own thoughts. He wanted to know what I thought and felt. He saw me as an equal. It was a revelation. Over our 8 years together, I grew into myself because he made that safe. When he died, I felt annihilated. I struggled to survive via the ways my family traditionally coped: hard work and stoic silence. During that period, I ran into the psychic. I may have had no mouth, but my body started to scream. In the 2 years following my husband's death, I developed a recurring skin rash, debilitating migraine headaches, arthritis, and a bone disease. I didn't understand. Thought the problem was stress or the job. I took a 6-month leave of absence, then a year off. It wasn't enough. Finally, 7 years after my husband's death, I abandoned my old life, job, family, and home, and tried to rebuild my life in an international community in an intentional community in another country. Speaking honestly was part of the culture there. Slowly, my symptoms diminished, though the headaches and the arthritis remained. Someone eventually suggested I write about my husband. I began. I found my voice. I never looked back. Thank you.
Thank you, Leslie. And I think, our finding our voice is something that's very important to me, and I hold it very dear to myself, because when I found mine, I never looked back either. And it's scary, but it's something that it doesn't make anything better, but it makes things better, I think, if that makes any sense. And, I think that the notion of being brave and honest and safe and strong and heroic even is when we can do this and we share these things that are painful and these experiences that can help others find their voice by hearing someone else speak. And I think that's very powerful too. And I'm very much an advocate of finding voices and helping others discover theirs and even strengthen my own. And sometimes I feel that I look at myself like the 7-year-old photo of me back in the day, and I have to remember, I hate you. No, I'm just kidding. But that, he had a voice just as much as I have a voice, and our bodies are just as loud as our faces, and our minds are just as loud as our hearts. And so thank you very much, Leslie. And our next speaker is our guest speaker today from the community, because they're all from the communities. And she is a photographer, which is weird because there are still no photographs of my head, which I'm not sure why, but whatever. And so she'll speak about photography and how photography in its art form also brings us together, expresses ourselves, and acts as a tool of survival, just how writing is for all of us, how writing can take our ugliness and turn it into something beautiful. We can do that with with all arts. And I'm really not a good photographer, but you are. And so Rafaela Hovig, please share a little bit, and we're happy to have you.
Thank you, Matthew. So my name is Rafaela. I'm originally from Monterey, California, which is where I started my photography. I would say it's been a transformative journey in its purpose for me. In the beginning, growing up, my mom was a photographer, and so it always interested me. And so she got me my first camera. And when she got me my first camera, she had been previously diagnosed with stage 4 melanoma, skin cancer, and had been battling it for a while. So for me, originally, I suppose photography was sort of a coping mechanism, or a way of artistic expression. And also it was a way for me to connect with my mom on a different kind of level. So when I started photography, it was pretty bad. It was pretty awkward and weird, and I started posting it online, and it didn't really get any popularity. But then one day I sat down with myself and I started looking at a bunch of photos and kind of studying them and examining them. And then, I just changed up my whole method and started taking brand new photos, primarily of macro work. So macro work is kind of specifying on the very small, minute details of things. So like a water droplet, or the intricacies of a fly's eye, just things like that, because growing up playing in the dirt and the mud and with the bugs and the sticks, seeing that little world really interests me. And I wanted to show people something that really wasn't as shown as much as other photographs, like landscapes or portraits and whatnot. So doing this, I did photography for maybe 2 or 3 years, and up until my mom passed away, in which I moved to Texas. And during that time, I didn't really do photography at all. I got there when I was 13, and depression and just living life, being a middle schooler and a high schooler, and being distracted with other things, until I went to college. And it was actually my kind of last year of college in which I begun a whole new style of photography with portrait work. And I started just with my friends who didn't really know how to model. And it's definitely different taking people who've never done modeling compared to models, because models know what they're doing. They know how to pose, they know how to move. My friends didn't know how to do any of this. But that intrigued me because it was a bit more of a challenge. So I started doing this and posting it to Instagram and whatnot. And I eventually, ended up working with, pop stars, models, all different types of people, and started getting gigs for weddings, for baby showers, for a lot of modeling agencies and models portfolios and whatnot. So I made a business out of it. I became a professional photographer. And after I began to get really into it, I kind of changed my path into using photography, maybe not necessarily as a political statement, but as something that, like, I would say that a good photograph needs to have soul and be open, and not so much provide answers, but rather trigger questions, have intrigue and have several layers of meaning, and not, so one dimensional. So by doing this, I collaborated with a lot of different types of artists and models and all types of people, including some magazines, to create work that was thought provoking and that kind of teased different ideas and perceptions out of people, which personally I think is really important. It's kind of like the quote, putting yourself in somebody else's shoes. And it kind of relates to, you know, what you're talking about, Matthew, with compassion and everything, and having empathy and sympathy, and just kind of looking at a situation from somebody else's view, basically. And that can bring large amounts of growth. It can bring about more questions. It can bring about inspiration. It can bring about a lot of things, positive. And so that's where the path that I went down. But, you know, that's not to say like I didn't work with magazines or do fashion editorials or whatnot, which is a lot different than creatively collaborating on photographs. So doing a magazine, the pictures need to be coherent and able to present a story comprising of at least 8 or 10 images, which all must be excellent. The pages of a magazine tend to lend itself very well to storytelling, essentially. And getting these ideas, getting these different creative ideas stems from everything. It's inspired from a wealth of sources, you know, all different types of art, literature, social matters, films, paintings, you know, different cultural trends, short films, music, really everything that can bring about ideas, however way that works for you as an individual. Also, while doing a lot of fashion photography, it's really important to do what the client wants you to do, which is why it's very different than just working with other people who have like-minded ideas. When you're working for a company or for a client, you know, you do what they want you to do. And not to say that it doesn't have your artistic flair to it, but you know, if they want the makeup a certain way, if they want the clothing a certain way, then you need to appease to your client. So, you know, for example, a fashion photograph doesn't just show clothes that need to be advertised. You know, it shows the meaning and the purpose behind those clothes, essentially. And, you know, after a couple months, you have to remember the mere retail value of a product dies away, but images, so to speak, emancipate and can go down in history forever. You know, photographs have made it a huge impact on history. And you know, I'll reference like Kevin Carter's it's like a child and a vulture. And if any of you have seen this photo, it's a vulture somewhere in Africa and a very emaciated, starving child in the fetal position lying there. And you know, when this photo came out, it won the Pulitzer Prize. And a lot of people were outraged. How could you stand there and not help, sort of yada yada. But it brought about a lot of thought from people. You know, we may think that, oh, people just know these things. They know they're starving children, or you know, people less fortunate than them in different ways. But psychologically, it really imprints in a human's mind when they have a visual representation of what's happening in the world. So in that sense, like that really, it just imbues a sense of intrigue in me that I want to explore and further explore. Now coronavirus has made it hard, definitely, to be a photographer in a lot of ways, since you need to socially interact with people, obviously, and sometimes in mass scale, such as weddings and so on. but that just still doesn't stop the creative process that goes into it. And, you know, making art, it doesn't have to be perfect. Um, you know, it just has to have your thought and your love and your passion in it, which is what I've been doing. So yeah, thank you.
Awesome. You know, it's cool. I wrote almost a whole page of notes, and it's probably because I wrote really big, but you know, it's still a whole page, and that's something. But I didn't want to, you know, I think it's really cool that we're on Zoom, and that with photography you can zoom into life, and you can really get that, you know, not a bird eyes view, but like an eyeballs view, you know, because right there, and it's really cool when you can look into something and really break it apart, see what makes it tick, and see what makes it move and laugh and smile and cry and hate and everything else. And I do have questions for the Q&A, so be ready for that. But the idea of a photo having a soul is really cool. And I wanted to relate it to words, of course, because, you know, I'm not good at photos, but I think I'm relatively okay at words. And, you know, once we speak and we give life to the words, they're on their own. And like you said, you know, they emancipate themselves and they're theirs and they're living and they're breathing just like we are. And the same thing with the photo, I think. Once you snap it or you print it or however it works, it's alive now. And it's not yours anymore. It's its own entity that can be whatever someone needs at whatever time they need it. The same way a book can or a poem can. And they're immortal. You know, and that reminded me of Shakespeare's Sonnet 18, where if you know that sonnet, you know, it's, you know, as long as men can live and eyes can see, so long lives this, and this gives life to thee. And, you know, as long as we can read the poem, the object of the poem is immortal. As long as we can see the picture, it's forever. And I think that's part of, I think the otherworldliness of art, and that it can transcend our life and the life of the artist and the life of those who view it. And it can go back in time and it can go forward in time, and it can be right here in this moment. And maybe your photograph now, or my poem, or Helen's story, or whatever else, it doesn't matter today, but in 200 years, it's the photo that the world needs. And I think that is, you know, one of the things that art can bring to the world, regardless of what it is, a recipe. You know, but there could be a international conflict, and then this chocolate chip recipe is just peace. And we obtained peace because of, you know, great grandma's chocolate chip recipe that was on, you know, a stupid piece of paper or a napkin that someone saved. And I think that it just adds so much to the pressure, of course, but also the importance of magnificence and the fun, you know, because I think it is fun. So thank you very much. And I look forward to having the conversation with everybody in a little bit, but I want to introduce our next speaker, and we're going to close out. We have an interactive kind of experience. Hopefully I can figure this out, Alan, but Alan he's in Berkeley. And so we're sending you, you know, I'm in Southern California, not as orange up down here, but sending you stay healthy as best as you can, along with everybody else. So Alan, share a little bit about, you know, your approach, who you are, what you're doing, and then, you know, just let me know when you want me to share the photos. But Alan, Alan Byrne, everybody. So please.
There we go. Well, thank you, Matthew. And wow, I was so riveted to everybody's presentations, readings, and presentation by Rafaela. It was just fabulous. So if you feel the same way, which I'm sure you do, you should get this book, because this has a lot of the writing in there, and it has the first poem I'm going to read, which is called Dream of Tangles. Now, downstairs with the laundry, I hear again your voice softly tell. I see the long, large sheets placed apart in the large load after the long spin have found each other through the little pieces, underwear, cases, light socks, snaking toward, then tying in a swirl together till I unwind them and they dry, tumbling apart. So as Matthew mentioned, I'm in Berkeley. It's just stopped being orange. It was so orange this morning at 11 o'clock that it looked like it was in the middle of the night or something. It was so peculiar. And Berkeley is an odd city. I've lived here for 95% of my life in a 4 square block area, but many of the people in Berkeley think that they live in Manhattan, which is patently ridiculous. But they think that's where they live because it has this huge university, which I do want to point out barely passed muster. Oakland barely allowed the University of California to exist in Berkeley, but that's another story. But it's a small town with a big university. It's a weird place that way. This poem is in my first book called No, No, the Saddest, which is a very sad book about my first wife and her demise and death. And it was a very hard time that went on until, let me check, last week. So that's now 41 years ago. And grief is a weird thing. And I felt this in the presentations today. It's really hard to articulate it. It doesn't work that well. And yet that's what we're doing. That's what we're gonna do. That's what we wanna do. That's what our audiences, our receivers want us to do. So it's an interesting thing. Next, Startle. That's the name of a chapbook I've been working on. Thank you, Abby Blum, for all your help with that. In that chapbook, I refer a bunch of times to Malcolm X. And recently I've been rereading Malcolm X. He often spoke so far ahead of his time into this time that it's just staggering. And in the 1964 Egyptian Gazette, he stated, preceding all civil rights is, quote, the right to be a human being, unquote. Have we figured that out in this country? I don't think so. I do not think so. Malcolm X was a visionary. By describing what he saw, he predicted so much, and so much that's happening now. And I repeat, we haven't figured it out yet. He said it all in the early 60s and late 50s. And just as in this next poem, I talk about people experiencing homelessness, people that we don't think of as human beings. We don't know how to do that yet. We try sometimes. And I also want to dedicate my reading to Malcolm X today because it's a pivotal time in our history. And I just want to do that. Weeping for beings. Weeping for beings without a solitary tale to wrap around. What can they say that will long last enough to implore the so fiery others who surveyed mouth? Today we passed by our equals who have less, nothing. We handed into our pockets, put coins into their cans and gloved fingers. They flinched to a touch, knowing we had perhaps infected them in these lengthy pandemics that are now wide world, if not nearly endless. And the passing on of these viruses circling and circling in certainty. And I want to say this again, that grief has such a trouble with articulation. As I jump back to 1947 and read a poem by the great Turkish master Nazım Hikmet Ran. This poem is called in Turkish Davet, and it means invitation. And the translation is by Fuat Engin. Invitation. Galloping from far Asia and jutting out into the Mediterranean like a mare's head. This country is ours. wrists in blood, teeth clenched, feet bare, and this soil spreading like a silk carpet. This hell, this paradise is ours. Shut the gates of plutocracy. Don't let them open again. Annihilate man's servitude to man. This invitation is ours to live like a tree, single and at liberty, and brotherly like the trees of a forest. This yearning is ours. And I don't know how to say this, but I accidentally came upon this poem looking, just kind of leafing through a volume, and this is exactly how I feel about the current politics, filled with hope and despair, like they're blowing up in my brain. So Matthew, put up the one that says perfect distance. So this is a photo that I took several years ago in New York City outside the Merchant's House Museum. Please visit there whenever you can travel again. And I was looking, I have a desire to publish on a site called Please See Me, which I highly recommend. And I saw this photo, and they had a kind of a theme about that fit to it. And I said, oh, it's about the pandemic, but it's years before the pandemic. It's a perfect physical distancing. Look at that, perfect. Minus the people, of course. Thank you, Matthew. And here's what I say to that photograph. If this is the quiet before, what is next? And where the sound of noises? All right, now I want to jump back to the early 19th century. And I want to talk about a poet who's one of my favorites. This is an Italian poet. I lived in Naples for a year when I was a teenager, and I never recovered. Let me tell you an important fact. There is nothing in the United States like Naples, with the exception, perhaps, of New York sometimes. Naples is a different place. It is not the same as the United States, and certainly not the same as Berkeley. So this poet's name is Giacomo Leopardi. He is the second most revered lyric poet after Dante in Italy. He was a miserable human being most of his life. He had terrible times trying to have relationships with anybody, certainly intimate relationships, but he had more names than anyone. His full name was Giacomo Taldegardo Francesco di Sales Saverio Pietro Leopardi. That's a lot of names, more names than you guys have. Certainly more names than I have. Well, Matthew may have a lot of names, I don't know. The name of this poem is A se stesso. I'll read it in Italian and then I'll read my translation. A se stesso means to himself. Or poserai per sempre, stanco mio cor, per l'ingano estremo, che eterno io me credei. Peri, ben sento in noi di cari inganni, non che la speme, il desiderio è spento. Posa per sempre, assai palpitasti, non val cosa nessuna i moti tuoi, né di sospiri è degna la terra. Amaro è noia la vita, altro mai nulla, è fango il mondo. T'acqueto ormai, dispera l'ultima volta, al genere nostro il fatto non dono che il morire. Ormai disprezza te la natura, il brutto poter che ascoso a comun danno impera, e l'infinita vanità del tutto. And I have to tell a tiny story. I was honored to read at the National Library of Italy in Naples, thanks to knowing some people, because knowing people helps, but also because they were interested that I translated from the Italian. And they showed us some documents of Leopardi, who died on the side of Vesuvius after living most of his life in the north of Italy. And my friends who came with me to see the exhibit, to listen to my reading, started to weep when they saw these documents. That's how connected they are to this poet, especially in Naples, because that's where he died. To himself. Now you will be at rest forever, weary heart of mine, for it has perished, that final deceiver, the one I believed eternal, perished, well aware of the deceptions dear to us, not just the hope, the desire is dead. Rest forever, you have beaten enough, not worth anything to anyone you're beating, neither is earth worthy of sighs. Bitter and boring is life, nothing else, and the world is sludge. Calm yourself now, despair for the final time. To our humankind, fate has given only death. Now despise yourself, nature, the brute power that reigns under cover, damaging all of us, and the infinite vanity of all things. Whoa, that poem, it's a powerful poem. It was published last year in Reunion, a magazine in Dallas, Texas. The next poem is called Leant To. I'm going to spell it because I'm not pronouncing it good enough. L-E-A-N-T and then T-O. Leant To, like you're leaning. And it was published in the fabulous Raw Art Review, which I'll show you a copy of that. There it is. It's this copy here. Very good magazine. Please subscribe. And it was shortlisted for their 2019 Charles Bukowski Prize for Poetry. Leant To. Carrying too many shopping bags, he walks through the uncrowded corner park and takes in blooming and the woman who lies back on a bench as if in bed and leans slightly right, eyes closed, in a great coat in the cold bright, legs tucked under her bench to keep them warm, her long fingers held and her relaxed face olive dark with umber hair surround, a look of finitude in the late sun on her eyelids, and looking closer, she looks softer as he passes, but also much older, and he imagines them joining their lips lightly. Her mouth opens, still her face has run skeletal as she suns on this bench of wood. Her sex is smooth and his sex aroused. For a slow beat in day's dream, he older than he knew. And if you haven't figured out yet, I'm really old. In fact, I'm 71 today. Today is my birthday. So Matthew, show the next photograph, please. And I shot this photo actually out on my back porch. And I like the way this came out. It's very evocative. And I tend to combine my photos often with words. That's a Japanese form called a haiga. And the painter, the haiga painter, would paint and also write a short haiku poem. Well, I use photographs. I don't paint. Emptying the sky into the mind. Okay. We'll go back to me. And I'm going to read my last poem, which is called Sitting Alone Perfect. It's a poem that was published by the Rat's Ass Review, which is a cool title for a review, also online. Sitting Alone Perfect. Why do they not talk about me. Sitting alone, perfect, heart out, ripped, look, red, first, feet, met, made, kicked, down, take, spent, fist, fit. Midnight, on way, sitting alone, perfect, in my passing, in the hall, spirits, with all I know. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. Happy birthday.
Thank you.
You know, it's really cool that, you know, when I read your work and when we speak, I'm like, hey, you know, we kind of have a lot of things in common. And now I know, you know, you're barely older than me.
That's it.
You know? And we're like the same person. It's fantastic.
Twins.
And, you know, but it's something that it's really great when you spoke about the photos and when we write, you know, with the visual aid or something like that. And it's when I was in school, it's a ekphrasis or whatever. And
Right.
if you don't know what it is, look it up. But it's really cool. It's a fun word, just like epizeuxis. If you're a literary person, those are, you know, I like these words because no one knows what they are, but makes me sound smart if I can say them.
Well, you're very smart. I do want to say one thing about ekphrasis, which is really amazing. If you have writer's block, artist block, whatever, it's a good exercise. It's a muscle mover. It's besides the fact that it's just fat. I do it a lot now with my own work, but I've done it for years with other artwork of different kinds. It's really powerful.
Definitely. And I think that's a good strategy if someone does have writer's block, or if, you know, watch a movie, go look at photos, and, you know, if you want to write an angry poem, just type angry into Google and see what happens.
Turn on the news.
Yeah. You know, the news is really good for getting angry. And, you know, I think something I was noticing while you were sharing, when everybody else was sharing, is that, you know, lately I've been trying to find a theme for all of our events, or something to kind of, you know, keep it unified. And I didn't have one today, and yet somehow we had a theme, all of us. And it's like the universe just took care of it. And that was really cool. And, you know, your comments about grief and with compassion, and how all of us in pain and all of these things. And I remember a while ago, and I think as writers or as artists, you know, I had to read a eulogy. Well, I didn't have to, but I read one, and I didn't break down. I didn't stumble. I didn't mess up. I didn't fall apart. And I was asking myself, and I was asking my former professors, I was like, why? I thought, what's wrong with me? Why was I able to do it without crumbling? And she told me, she was like, no. She's like, no. She's, you know, you've been preparing for this your entire life, you know, as writers, and we've been taking the sad stuff and turning it into something and being able to put ourselves into these positions. And she said, there's nothing, you know, this is what you're made for. And I was like, oh, so I'm not a monster? Okay, cool. I feel better.
No. You are a monster, but not about that. And we really are twins. I do have to say that I have done numbers of eulogies in churches and other places, and I don't weep. That doesn't mean I don't feel, but I don't weep. I did one once for one of my oldest friend's mother, and this guy comes up in the church and says, I want you to do mine when I die. And I thought, oh no, that's really made for something. The guy's hiring me ahead of time.
Totally.
Money up front.
Yeah.
And so with this, I'm gonna move us into our Q&A session now, our discussion. So I have all of our faces here. So no more what you were doing earlier. You got to stop it, all of you. Okay. But, you know, my first question, I think, is going to be for everybody, and it was inspired by photography and Rafaela's presentation. And it's, you know, how do you create a narrative with emotions, with untangible things? How do you create a narrative with a picture and a set of pictures, or just these words that you kind of picked out from the sky and the universe? And how do you put them together to create this whole cohesive kind of storyline or anything? So.
I feel like that's a tough question personally. I mean, how? By feeling, I guess, and wanting to express those emotions, influenced by variant forms of media, life experiences, people, individuals in my life, um, things I've done, a wide variety and a lot of different components to convey a message. And I mean, how in many different ways, in numerous ways, because I feel like, you know, so often we tend to try to divide ourselves from other people, and make ourselves different, but truly, you know, we're all having the human experience, and to some degree, you know, we all feel joy, we all feel sadness, we all feel anger, in different shapes and forms and at different time periods of our life. So with that, I feel like, you know, whatever you create, there's probably definitely someone out there able to relate to your art in some way.
Can I speak?
Always.
I think we create narrative through images. And Raphaela's example of that Pulitzer-winning photograph showing the starving child and the vulture, you know, that just immediately makes me think that a picture's worth 1,000 words, because I doubt I could ever write something that would impact the way those two images together do, or the two together in one picture. So that's, you know, that is one powerful, and the narration is all there, you know, but people bring their own narration to it. They see it and they have to go with, you know, another one I can think of, that really famous photograph of the little girl stark naked running away from her bombed out Vietnam village.
Vietnam, right?
That is such a powerful photograph. And it was, what, 50 years since it was taken? Longer, perhaps. But it lives in memory. It really is eternal. And immediately you feel the panic and the terror of that child and the direness of her situation. So it's images that do it, I think.
As soon as Raphaela mentioned that picture, I thought immediately of the Vietnamese girl drenched in napalm with her skin peeling off, and other images from Vietnam, which I grew up with, playing out on the television. So those images become part of your soul and become part of who you are. The Viet Cong soldier who was being shot, I mean, in the middle, I mean, the actual shot was captured in the photograph. So, yeah. It doesn't take much to remember those images. They're just imprinted.
I think of the photo from the Spanish Civil War of the soldier kind of falling. It just personifies the entire tragedy of that battle and that war. I am not being a devil's advocate here, but I do want to say that one of the reasons I like to put short poems with photographs is that very short poems are so compressed that they can sometimes do that kind of work. And that's what the haiku writers wanted to do. That was their goal. And so it may not last the same way in people's minds, but a poet like Isa is just so fabulous that, you know, I get an Isa in my email box every day so I can start out the day right.
Yeah, no, definitely. You know, it's I think words, sometimes there's too many. And you just tell someone, hey, shut up. You know, you're done. Let's stop. You've overstayed your welcome. And also the same thing, sometimes there's too few. And I think that balance between whether it's visual or or words, you know, that we have to, that's the fun part, the creative part, the hard part. That's what makes it worth it. That's what makes it challenging and fulfilling when you're done, or if you ever even finish it. And so I guess my next question is similar, where, you know, as writers, we're constantly trying to revise, and we revise it to the grave until it's just a gray pile of mush. And, you know, there's too many
It's
flavors.
better, Matthew, it's better.
And so Rafaela, with photography, how many times do you take a picture of something until you get it?
Well, now that I focus primarily on portrait work, if I'm doing, you know, creative work or working with models, you know, I could be taking photos for maybe 45 minutes to an hour and a half, somewhere in there. And I could take anywhere from like 600 to 800 photos, which seems like an outrageous amount of photos, and it is an outrageous amount of photos. But after I do that and I import them all to my computer, I go and filter through all the ones that I like, put them in a folder, and then I go and filter through those ones that I like to really narrow it down. Because despite taking hundreds of photos, you know, 100 photos of the same position, there are often times where only like 1, 2, or 3 photos really capture the atmosphere and just the vibe of what I want. And, you know, the model has the perfect look, and, you know, the lighting is perfect. So yeah, it takes a lot of patience and time to pick the photos, the best photos.
So I have one word: Photoshop.
Yes,
What?
I use it.
And so now what I want to do is I want to open up the Q&A to all of you, and anybody. I want you to discuss with each other, because that's what I want to be selfish. I enjoy listening to you all speak, and so I want you to speak with each other and ask each other questions, and you know, really explore your own creativity as you bounce off of other people's ideas. And so that's my selfishness for today, if you can so indulge me.
Leslie, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I just wanted to say that Alan's example of haiku poetry or images poetry really works for me. Very precise, very concise, and very powerful. Go ahead, Helen.
I'm curious, Leslie, if you found your voice publicly, do you find yourself able to express yourself and just not give a damn at this point in your life?
Well, I'd love to say yes.
That's, yeah.
It doesn't quite work like that. But when I went on in that essay, when I got to the end of it, you know, I did say, I feel safer.
Yeah.
And writing for me is a bit safer than speaking publicly, right. But it's also better in that it's a bit more intelligent, you know, sure. Because I have revised it and I've kind of synthesized it and made it strong. I'm much better than I used to be, I have to say. And there are a bunch of reasons for that, but I think kind of letting go of my family culture was a big part of it.
And that's what I was getting at, that it's so difficult, but at a certain point, you know, I find it very brave, really, that you've put it in writing first, but you're also saying that you're still working on that. You're
absolutely.
Still, yeah. We all are.
You know, I think it's somehow greatly liberating, with apologies to my ancestors, when your parents die. You know, they're dead, and I published my memoir after my father's death. And I don't know that I mean, it wasn't done until well after he died, but I don't know whether I would have had the nerve to publish it while he was still alive.
I understand that completely.
I feel that. I think, you know, the concept or the topic of ancestors, and, you know, I know that especially, I think in certain cultures, there's the idea of what legacy are we leaving behind, and who's the legacy of what, you know, and it's like, you are, I am, that's it. That's what it is. You know, too bad. That's what you get. And, you know, I think that that pressure, you know, like you said, that once we kind of take off that coat, it's like, okay, let me go be cold in the air. I don't need your coat, you know, or whatever it is. And then we can, at least, you know, then I have my voice, and I can know that I can understand that it's my voice, and whether it's good or bad, it's mine. And that can allow me to tweak it, to make it better, to make it worse, to say, you know what, I'm an asshole today. Hey, I'm an asshole today. Too bad. I'm not trying to fight it. I'm just going to be what it is. And then tomorrow, if I'm not, well, then I'm not. But it's, you know, it's this. And I think with our writing, that's how we can do it. And I think with art and with photography, when we get that revision, when we're in that step and we get to the editing process, is when we could really say, okay, this is the voice, or, you know, but stronger or more singular about how I want it to be, as opposed to how it just comes out.
Getting rid of the distracting bits.
Right.
Yeah. You know, or, you know, like a recipe, when you get your, you know, you just trim off the excess stuff. You scoop out the little bits of oil you don't want, you know, or whatever it
Back
is.
to chocolate chip cookies.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, what I did have a question again about photos, just because I'm not. If you've ever seen a picture I've taken, it'll make you cry in the bad way, because it's just bad. But you know, how do you approach portraits as opposed to things? And then, you know, if I
Could
can
you
get
repeat that?
anybody else too. What?
Could you repeat that?
So how do you approach approaching taking a picture of a person, you know, doing portraits and stuff, as opposed to a landscape, or when you really zoom in on a mug or a water droplet? What's your mindset going into a human, like a living person?
Well, with doing portrait photography, it's definitely completely different than, I mean, I wouldn't say it's completely different. I would say it's similar but different, like most things. In just the sense, with macro work, you know, you go to a craft store and you get, you know, some cool fabric or some little knickknacks, stuff like that, and you can kind of set up a stage, so to speak, to take pictures of the play. Whereas, you know, doing portrait work, it's usually not just a photographer. It's, you know, a makeup artist and a hairstylist and a designer, and multiple models. So it takes a lot of teamwork to put together one photo. So I would say, yeah, macro work is definitely more individualized, and same with, you know, landscape work. Like, you know, portrait work, you're probably most likely going to be working in a city, you know, working in tall buildings, working with a lot of other people. If you're doing landscape, you're probably going to be traveling, you know, around the country or the world, uh, maybe with a lot of people, but probably, you know, by yourself or with a few people. So I'd say they're just different experiences, and they definitely bring about different kinds of people with different kinds of personalities.
I think that's really cool, especially the part about the environment. I didn't even think about that, where, you know, I think if where you are has an impact of what you create and how you create it. And I think that's a step that sometimes we overlook. And then your last comment about experience is actually kind of cool, because in one of my classes right now, we're going over different kinds of experiential learning theories and things like that, and how the word experience, we can go at it in two directions, with how what I experience inside with emotions and anger, and then the type of experiences I have, whether it's 10 years of experience in the kitchen, and all of it, you know, works together, and it's just this big kind of, you know, smorgasbord of things that work together. And I think that our writing and our creativity is where we take all the kinds of experiences that we have and turn them into a 5-word poem or a 6x9 photo or a splatter on a painting or a canvas or whatever it is. And I think it shows how transformative art can be, where you can have all 5 of us look at the same poem and take it somewhere else, and we could have the same person read it to us and we could hear a different voice even. And I think that it's magical. Magic exists in the form of us, in the form of art and creativity. And so I'd like to open it up to any of you for any last comments before I send us home here.
So I have a comment on the last thing that Rafaela said. This is not to delve into what a professional does with her work, but I do think that one of the things that joins us all is a kind of storytelling that we do. And that's true with every one of these aspects of nonfiction, poems, photos. And to go back even further to St. Francis of Assisi, when I'm taking a photo, I look at a rock. The rock is alive. I want the rock to be alive and have a personality and all that kind of stuff. So that kind of voodoo, I think, works in art too, where you kind of think of all of life as having a kind of electricity and life to it.
Definitely. Anybody else?
Alan, I just wanted to say thank you for being a librarian for so many years. Libraries were my sanctuary as a kid. They were where I went to discover the world, to learn things about faraway worlds that I knew I'd never visit. So thank you.
You're welcome. And I do want to say, not to bring back politics, but along with the United States postal system, it's one of the great American institutions. The public
Absolutely.
library was invented in America, and we better keep it around. That's what I say.
Absolutely, I agree.
Definitely.
Thank you for saying that about libraries.
Libraries were my sanctuary too, as I was a kid. Yeah, I couldn't express, but I could absolutely read and did read
Yeah.
voraciously.
There's nothing like the smell of books in the stacks, the real smell of books. I can't read a Kindle. I just can't do it. I have to pick up a real book.
You know what? That idea of the smell of books is really cool, because you know what smells like a book?
That book.
Iron for Life, by Nervous Ghost Press. And so thank you everybody. And I'll share a few words here before we leave. But again, Alan, happy birthday.
Yes, happy birthday, Alan.
And
1949, Alan?
49.
Good year.
Good year.
great year. And so everybody, thank you for tuning in. Of course, we're happy to have you. Thank you to Max Books. And be sure to support Max Books if you're in the area, online, anything. Show our community that we're still here and that they still have us, because without our small businesses, without our bookstores, our restaurants, and everything else, we have no neighborhoods. And we need our neighborhoods because that's where we live. And so make sure you support them and support all of the other bookstores and cafes that we've had here, and all the future ones. Stay tuned for new events in October for Halloween themes, maybe. Really excited about that. Follow us on all of our social media. Instagram, Nervous Ghost Press, Twitter, Nervous_Ghost, Facebook, and of course, www.nervousghostpress.com. If you would like to join us and be part of these conversations, email us, because we would love to have you. And it's something that makes me really happy, and I'm excited to listen to everybody. And the more of you there are, the less you hear from me. So it works both ways. And so our next event is September 14th, hosted by the Book Loft in Columbus, Ohio. And that will be at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 o'clock Pacific. And we're excited to stay in the, different part of the country and really bring, both of our cultures, because as a wise woman told me once, the East Coast people are a pain in the ass. And, it's really nice to
We have an East Coast person here, Matthew.
hey, some of us can't stay up past 11 at night. So, when you all out there on the Pacific time zone, I work all day, I'm a morning person.
It was Helen, but I really enjoy.
6 different names of bookstores in North Carolina, great independent bookstores in Asheville and Raleigh and
Absolutely.
I remember Charlotte here. Yeah. So
yeah, and I'm gonna communicate with you too and everybody that we have across the country, because I really like bringing us together, and it's really cool to see the different, how different the coasts are. And the first time I went to New York, it blew my mind because I was like who are these people? But it's cool because it's so educational, and I enjoy bringing, meeting you and having you meet each other, and it brings me a lot of happiness. And so thank you, everybody. I'm going to end this, and thank you again, Rafaela, for joining us and sharing your work and your positivity and your process.
Thank you.